We're here to talk about ESG and the ESG drive in the senior living, later living sector. We want to hear what's on your minds and unpack the issues that you're facing and hear about how the ESG movement is evolving.
The great positive is that consumers are behind ESG and they want to be better and do better. So the education piece has moved forward to an extent, but how are operators, regulators communicating and understanding of language to get that resident engagement, to get the data that you need? Because it's almost the next stage of that education piece.
What you just articulated there, isn't that really the challenge that's in the room here, which is that everyone buys into the principle of ESG and what it means, but there's a cost, and the ball being kicked around at the moment, using a metaphor there, is who is going to pay for it and where is it going to come from?
In England, it's still a very new concept to describe it to landowners, for them to understand what it is. Trying to price it, trying to do viability on it is nearly impossible, because understanding the build costs and then the different models that operators will use, involving care homes.
We also then have the opportunity, as we are on the new build side of things, constructing to net zero, very ambitious standards, which is fantastic. But we also need to balance the needs of our users. And that product is constantly evolving and being refined and being tweaked alongside all of the accepted conventions of getting the building shape and form correct, making sure that we're designing the product holistically rather than what I think sometimes personally can happen is we'll design something to look great and then try and bolt a whole load of M&E on it to make it perform great. And when you're trying to hit those net zero standards, that approach simply does not work. Then, of course, against all of that, you also have infrastructure constraints in that you've now got to think, have I got a big enough local grid connection to power this typically all-electric net zero scheme? So it is a real, you've got to get your crystal ball out, haven't you?
From my perspective, it's across the spectrum of investors, developers, operators, and the customer are all demanding this now. They're demanding to see that their building is energy efficient with the development process, that certain requirements are being met.
I think the regulatory framework has to be really careful at that, because if you look at our BREEAM scorecards, or if you look at those slightly binary approaches to sustainability, that can force you down, because you have to tick off, X credits and blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't necessarily take the nuance of like every building is bespoke and every operator is, and it can force you down a road where it isn't the optimum result. That kind of blanket approach doesn't help to serve anyone. And another great thing I think is that even solar panels, that this is the problem with sustainability as a topic, because it's such a Pandora's box, and you think you're doing the right thing, sticking solar panels on the roof everywhere. If you actually drill into how much carbon went into making every single one of those panels and their useful life, do they ever even pay that back over their lifespan?
A lot of these sort of technologies are quite new and innovative, and it's only over the next few years that we'll really see whether they do pay back.
Yeah.
And it's all about collecting that data and being honest with it and saying, well, we thought we were doing a really good thing, we put PVs everywhere. Actually, we haven't saved that many emissions, or we haven't, they haven't paid themselves back.
We have gone back and done post-occupancy valuations, and where we've put in sensors. To be fair, we haven't done it as much as we'd like to because of COVID, but this was before COVID. We did it on one of our local authority and developments. We put sensors in, we interviewed residents, we collated data for about 6 or 7 months to see how the building was performed. And the thing that came out of that whole process for me was not so much how the building was performing, it's actually how the residents were using the buildings, because they did not understand the technology. We also have one project which is on site at the minute, which is whole life net zero, and that brings a completely different review of what's going on there, because we're having to look at all the concrete. We're looking at every single element that has been put into that building, but looking at the design life of them, because a lot of the products that we put in, we're not thinking enough about how long is it going to last, not how long's the warranty, but how long will it actually last for. So we're all seeing this lovely resurgence of bricks and think this is great, but bricks are really good, because although they're not fantastic in manufacture, they last a long, long time. So that's the sort of thing that we need to change as a profession, I think, change quite quite dramatic. And actually, in the project we worked on with Socius in Bristol, we were looking at roofing materials at one point on it, and our consultants said, "Oh, there's this pyramid of the because we were looking at using some zinc, I think it was, time zero zinc's one of the worst products for carbon production." And we went, okay, well, what's the best? Well, at the top of the pyramid, the best one you could possibly use was straw. And we said, well, that's not going to work, is it? So it's those sorts of things that we're coming out against, and we've got to always be thinking about not just what it costs to build it, but what it costs to maintain it. When do you have to replace it? And that's the real thing that we need to get to as a sector.
I just wanted to say one thing that Jenny said about the straw roof. I think hand in hand, another great topic in our industry at the moment is fire. And what that means, especially for what we develop, because we are predominantly central London location and therefore high density and high rise. I know that's not as relevant necessarily to other people around the table, but it has again come in direct conflict with actually some of the sustainability design principles that you would like to adopt. Building in timber, building with a straw roof. We can't do that if because equally on the other side of the fence, we need to be building our buildings so that they don't fall down in a fire, etc., etc. So there's a lot of other things at play at the moment in the regulatory landscape which don't make it as straightforward and actually directly conflict each other. So everybody's trying to work that out at the moment with the Building Safety Act and what that means. But it is emerging as an interesting thing that we are trying to respond to live on projects that are in construction. So that's a challenge, I think, for all of us as well.
There's a disconnect between the value that we perceive ESG and the pound note value. And I think you're right. We look at it, and if the development takes 12 months or 18 months, it's, we need to work on it on a does it make sense basis, and potentially the returns on that will be lower for the developer or for the operator. It will be a lower return. That's their decision to take. Yeah, and the bank would respect that.
We had technology companies, we had architecture, we had food and beverage, and it really showed how it's about linking up operators of later living schemes with different partners like that. That's where I think the drive will come from towards ESG.
We'll do a quick once round the table with your forecasts of where we're going to be in 12, 24 months, in a couple of years' time. Where do you think the sector will be or won't be?
We'll start to see more scale. I think the industry is scaling up at pace, and actually we'll start to see how it's helping to address some of the wider housing issues we have in our towns and cities. But more importantly, I think we'll start to see some of the social benefits realised. So the impact it has on people who are living there, but also more importantly, the wider benefits to the local community will actually start to be realised, and we can see the positive impact that these developments will have in their local areas.
I think we're going to see over the next couple of years some new entrants into the market, and particularly from some of the other living sectors. And they'll bring quite a lot of knowledge and expertise on how those sectors are working and how ESG is working in those sectors and how they're engaging residents, and that will help kind of grow this sector.